back down and shut your trap. It's time for
Keeping It Sports with them three.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Well, I'll need some beer.
Are you ready?
You have to ask me nicely.
Come on now, don't be bashful.
Are you ready? Are you ready for
Place for the best sports talk and news surrounding each league.
I can prove it with my usual flawless logic.
Hey, man, this time I'm going to do it my way.
What's your name again?
And now, here's your host, M3, Mike Rosansky. Coming to you from Freehold, New Jersey. It's time for Keeping It Sports with M3, usually powered by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting, but this podcast is still available in all places that you can find a podcast. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everything's going well for you here on this Tuesday, the 10th day of September. I am, of course, Mike M3 Rosansky. Hope you're all having a great Tuesday afternoon. Hope you're all off to a awesome start to your week. We started off with on Sunday, really going back to last Thursday, the beginning of what I said last week is 18 consecutive weeks of almost a holiday-like atmosphere. After long waiting, finally, the return of the National Football League. We waited a long time. We anticipated it all off season, even during free agency and training camp. The NFL remains the hottest topic in the world. You see why with all these ratings. You see why with the amount of people that are buying streaming services, or the people that are getting annoyed with DirecTV cutting their package with Disney, not being able to watch games from ESPN. We live, breathe, and die for football. And we got off to a really good start with this week one. See, week one, they pair up some really good matchups for the primetime spots, but elsewhere, you don't know what to expect because these teams don't play a lot of their starters in training camp. But I came away from some of these primetime games with some narratives, with some things that I already knew, some things that are cautionary tales, like opening night. Opening night continued a narrative, fair or unfair, that's going to hang over one of the biggest stars in this sport until he can finally conquer the dragon, until he can finally conquer his football demon. And that is Lamar Jackson's inability to defeat Patrick Mahomes. We saw this last year in the AFC Championship game, and then once again it reared its ugly head for Lamar on opening night. And opening night, even though Andy Reid has the best record in the NFL on opening weeks, he's even more amazing than we normally know him to be when you give him extra time to prep for a team, whether it be a bye or on opening night or after a 10-day layoff. He always has his teams geared up, ready to play, despite what kind of distractions there may be out there, such as Rashid Rice or the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift situation, or who left on that defense during the offseason. They're always full geared, ready to play. And you looked at the Ravens as one of their toughest opponents on their schedule to start off this year. But just when Lamar, you thought he was going to have his aha moment, just when you thought that he was going to finally conquer that demon, they came an inch short of having that moment. An inch short of what it looked like a game-tying or potential game-tying touchdown by Isaiah Likely. And it looked like John Harbaugh was going to go for 2 there and try to win the game, but likely stepped on the white line. It was clearly visible with his black shoes. The real problem here is people are going to get on likely for the shoes and the fact that he stepped out of bounds on the play. Lamar had the chance to get this done on the play before. He had Zay Flowers wide open in the end zone, and he overthrew him. That was the moment. That was the moment to tie this game and then put it in your coach's hands whether or not you were going to go for the game-tying extra point or try to win it all there with a 2-point conversion. But all the way around, it was not a good night for the Ravens, not a good night for Lamar Jackson as he continues to fail against Patrick Mahomes. The Ravens kept getting called for these illegal procedure penalties with how their left guards were lined up. They didn't have an answer for Chris Jones all night. Seemingly no one in this league does. And now the Chiefs just continue to hang over them and everybody else in this league as an immense problem to solve. One problem that I think really needs to be solved is what are these owners' obsession with playing international football games? Why did we have to have a game on Friday night in Brazil, of all places, where you have the Eagles staying 40 minutes away from the stadium and the Packers had to travel 2 hours away? You have these players telling their families not to come to the game. And even worse, you have a field that everybody's slipping all over, a field that people like the great J.J. Watt are commenting on Twitter that is not a real NFL playable field. This was once again just an embarrassing money grab for the NFL owners, having a game on Friday internationally and on a streaming service. Now, it had to be an awful night if you're a Giant fan watching that game, as you watch Saquon Barkley pretty much carried the Eagles to victory with 3 touchdowns, as Jalen Hurts was but had a couple of interceptions along the way that kind of set the Eagles back, including one by the former Giant Xavier McKinney, who quite frankly should still be a New York Giant, especially if you watch their secondary play. But the Green Bay Packers suffered a real scare in this game, losing Jordan Love now likely for at least a month with an MCL sprain in his left knee. And I don't know if you can really feel confident in going with Malik Willis as your quarterback. Remember, Malik Willis couldn't last in Tennessee. And if you're seeing the problems at quarterback that Tennessee is having right now with Will Levis, what does that say about Malik Willis that he couldn't beat out Will Levis for the Tennessee Titans quarterback job? If you're the Green Bay Packers, shouldn't you be getting on the phone with a veteran like Ryan Tannehill or Joe Flacco, someone who can come off the streets and perform for your team? And you look at these next 6 games for the Packers, there's a couple of soft landing spots, whether it be getting the Colts at home after you having now a 9-day rest. Then you play the Tennessee Titans. We saw how bad Will Levis was over the weekend. You got to go play the Vikings before, when you play the Rams in week 5, you hope to have Jordan Love back for that, because he's the one that can really get the best out of this wide receiver group. Because remember, you don't have that alpha male in your wide receiver group. You don't have that guy like you once upon a time had, like Devontae Adams. There's no Stephon Diggs on this team. There's no Tyreek Hill on this team. You have a bunch of very good wide receivers, but not someone who's going to step forward and try to carry the way for you like Cooper Kupp tried to do for the Rams on Sunday night. And even though the Lions won the game, I think I came out of that game equally impressed with the Rams as I was with the Lions. If you saw my preseason predictions for the Detroit Lions, then you would know I'm predicting them to come out of the NFC and represent them in the Super Bowl this year. There's a lot to like with this team, with Jared Goff, how smart a quarterback he is, their ability to run the football, and they are a running football team. You see on both sides of the line of scrimmage that they just bully teams around, as they did with the Rams in the later stages of this game, especially in overtime. They weren't effing around, weren't going to try to throw the football, just said, guys, the Rams are exhausted. The Rams look like they don't have much life left in them. Let's just run the ball right down their throat. And when you consider everything that was going against the Rams in this game, you have offensive linemen that are either suspended, inactive due to injuries, getting knee injuries during the game. They're moving guys from left guard to center, left tackle to guard. It's a complete mess. You had a former 7th round pick trying to stop Aiden Hutchinson, and he's getting bullied around the field. It's miraculous that Matthew Stafford had as much time to throw to Cooper Kupp as he did. And Cooper Kupp tried to drag this team kicking and screaming to victory, especially with the loss of Puka Nacua in the first half, who's now going to miss a month due to a PCL injury, an injury that he had already been dealing with during training camp. But I give the Rams a lot of credit for the fact that they were even competitive in this game. The one problem that I worry about with them is this offensive line going forward, because yeah, you did this against the Lions, and we've seen players, guys that are just guys, be able to rise up on one given night and perform here and there. But can you ask it from this makeshift crew on a consistent basis, especially when you have one legitimate wide receiver on your team? You're not a great running team, and you have a quarterback who's still, while very good, is 36 years old in Matthew Stafford, and has never been known as the fastest or most mobile quarterback in the world. So those are going to be things to watch for with the Rams. But all of those teams, whether they won or lost, came away not feeling like the world was ending, not feeling like, wow, we just crapped all over ourselves. That's kind of how I feel right now today as a Jet fan. I've been kind of annoyed over the last about 15 hours since this Jet game ended against the 49ers on how there's been this positive vibe with the Jets, how everyone seems to be walking away from it saying, oh, we finally got to see Aaron Rodgers. Look at the offensive line protect him, that he wasn't sacked more than one time. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jets sucked last night. The Jets were awful last night. The Jets faced a cold, hard dose of reality against the San Francisco 49ers last night. That was the blueprint on what the New York Jets want to be as a football team, as they went to Santa Clara, California, and after the first quarter, got their doors blown off. Were dealing with a running back, run the ball right down their throat, and that running back was not Christian McCaffrey. It was someone that no one's ever heard of, no one even knew was on the 49ers, a young guy named Jordan Mason. And it remains to be seen whether this was a last-second call to start Mason, or if he really knew since Friday. That's something that the league will look into. But even with that, this vaunted Jets defense did not show up. They allow this kid to run for about $150 right down their throat. After the first quarter, they were seemingly gassed. They were on the field for nearly 40 minutes. Now, they weren't done any favors because the offense was not providing any long drives, was not providing them any chance to breathe, any chance to really have a break here, whether it be the Breece Hall fumble early on in Jets territory that thankfully the defense was able to hold to just a field goal. Or how about on the first drive of the game, your third play, Allen Lazard has a pass thrown to him that even you or I should be able to catch, and he lets it go right through his fingers on what would have been a very easy first down and maybe built some momentum for this team going forward. I don't give a damn that he had 2 touchdowns in this game. Those were both garbage time touchdowns. One of them was on a free play in which the Jets were already down by 20, and Rodgers decided to just chuck it up. And then you have the touchdown on the very last drive of the game when Tyrod Taylor was in this. So I don't want to hear anything about, Lazard having a really big game. And then this defense played like shit. First quarter, you allow 2 first downs. For the rest of the game, you allowed 22 first downs. You allowed this kid that no one's ever heard of in Jordan Mason have his breakout game, probably the most added player today in people's fantasy leagues. And you got very little pressure on Brock Purdy. And hell, the biggest winner of this weekend probably turned out to be Hassan Reddick, because he was probably somewhere sitting back laughing at the lack of a pass rush from the New York Jets. I love the guy, but how is it that every year Quinnen Williams, who I've largely praised as being the second best defensive tackle in this sport, why is it he's always getting off to slow starts in his season? Why can he not bring it from opening week on? I still don't understand why Sauce Gardner missed extended periods of time in that first half. What, he's winded? He's gassed? I mean, bro, you're 23, 24 years old. Get your ass off the bench and play. It's one thing if you have a legitimate injury, but you're winded and gassed on the first game of the season? Are you kidding me? And then there's the Mike Williams fact. I can understand if they want to protect him, considering the Jets are playing 3 games in an 11-day span. After last night, they go to Tennessee this Sunday, and then after that have their home opener on the following Thursday against the New England Patriots. And with Mike Williams coming off of a knee injury last year, they want to progressively build him up. Well, then why is he on the active roster? Barely ever saw him on the field last night. It seemed like he was out there for maybe 5 or 6 plays. He should have been inactive, just like McCaffrey was for the 49ers. And then you start to build him up against Tennessee. Not going into week 1 and saying, it's a build-up process, we're trying to protect him. Isn't that what the preseason for? Isn't that what training camp is for? How is he not available to play? Because then you run into the same problems that you had last year, where Allen Lazard is dropping passes left and right, and then everyone is going to just lock in on Garrett Wilson, and he's got to put in a full body workout just to get the football. All the way around, it was very much an aggravating night. All the way around, it was something that just left me, quite frankly, as a Jet fan, saying once again, same old Jets. Now, I know you could be saying, I'm overreacting. It's week 1. But I've been here before. I've seen this script. The only positive thing that came out of this game was the fact that Aaron Rodgers didn't get hurt. He was all right. He was fine. Shaking off the rust. Clearly there was going to be some after playing only 4 snaps last year. He's really not played any football in about a year and a half. So you expected him to not be the full-on Aaron Rodgers yet. But the performance by the rest of this team was just downright painful to watch. It was a true wake-up call, hopefully, for them, and it provided them a blueprint on what kind of team they hope to be. And they better wake up and get things going on Sunday against the Titans. I know it's early to say this, you're already down 1 in the division after Josh Allen played Superman on Sunday, leading the Bills back from a 17-3 deficit. The Dolphins came back after some shakiness by the Jaguars, a fumble at the goal line by Travis Etienne that gave the Dolphins new life, allowed them to stay alive in this game. Hell, even probably the biggest surprise of the weekend, the Patriots going into Cincinnati and beating the Cincinnati Bengals. So the Jets are the only team in the AFC East without a victory right now. They got to bring it. This defense has got to bring it. Got to use this as a humbling moment that they're not as great as they like to think they are, not as great as some people in the media like to think they are. At times, you could argue they're a one-trick pony with their ability to play defense on passing downs. But hopefully they prove me wrong this week and take care of business against the Tennessee Titans. All right, there's a lot to get to here. I'm not sure how I'm going to fit it all into what I hope is only about an hour and 10-minute podcast, but I'm going to try to squeeze it all in. Will there be some thoughts on the rookies making their debut over the weekend? The quarterback situation in Pittsburgh, the ridiculous situation that Tyreek Hill was in leading into Sunday's game, a contract extension before opening day. I'll mix in some thoughts on the Yankees as well. There's so much to get to, so much that I want to talk about here this week, and I'm glad you guys could all join me for that. So, as I tell you each and every single week at this time, please sit back, relax, hell, put your feet up if you feel like it, and continue keeping it sports with M3.
I'll be back.
In the NFL, you don't want to be too aggressive with any of your week 1 reactions. Whether your team won or lost, you don't want to act like the season's over, or you don't want to act like you're going to the Super Bowl when you had no expectations. Yes, I'm annoyed today about the Jets, but I'm far from truly acting like it's Armageddon and that there needs to be swift changes. I need this team to be playing better. Robert Saleh definitely has got to be on the hot seat heading into this season. It can't be another 7-10 kind of year and think he's coming back. If it's like that, everybody's gone. We tend to overreact. We tend to give too far of an impression on anything after week 1, whether it be teams, players, hell, even rules. Like the new rule that they've instituted this year with the kickoff. I watched it for the first time these last few days, and I don't hate it. It's a bit confusing, especially with how you've got 10-on-10 lined up at the respective 45-yard lines, it looks like. The landing zone thing is kind of cool. I just don't like how far up they have the kicker. I think that's asking for a situation where you're constantly kicking it into the back of the end zone. I would much prefer if they're kicking the ball from, say, the 30-yard line. If you're saying that a touchback is the 30-yard line, then shouldn't the kicker be kicking from the 30? Give a little bit more of a chance at a return here. There was a lot of times where I'm watching these guys catch the ball at the back pylon. Now, there were more returns on average this week than there were last year's week 1. But still, it's going to take some time to adjust to this and truly judge. I think there will be tweaks along the way. It just remains to be seen what kind of tweaks we're talking about here. We also saw the debut of 3 of the rookie quarterbacks that were selected in this past year's NFL draft. And while all of them had their moments, no one just flat out fell on their face. No one embarrassed themselves. No one had their team questioning the sanity of their organization by drafting this player. You clearly saw that these are rookies. You clearly saw that it takes time. I think we've been spoiled over the years with some of these rookie quarterbacks that have come into the league and just set the world on fire right away. As remarkable a year as CJ Stroud had last year, remember, it took time. It took some weeks for him to finally get going and finally look like the player that we've come to know and expect from him. And it's going to take that for all of these guys. You saw some nice things from Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. Their ability to run around with the football, ability to make plays with not just their arm, but their feet, especially in the case of Daniels, who had 2 touchdowns on the ground in his own right. But I wish I would have seen a little bit more of running around from Caleb Williams. It seemed like he was trying too hard to, at times, be Superman for the Chicago Bears. And while there's been this unfair comparison, unfair expectation where he's going to be the next prototype of Patrick Mahomes or Aaron Rodgers, you got to remember, those guys did not start right away. Patrick Mahomes had a redshirt year with the Chiefs. Aaron Rodgers sat for 3 years before he played and then began to set the world on fire. Caleb Williams is being thrown right to the fire immediately. So it's going to take some time for him to show what he can do. He got very fortunate that he played a Tennessee Titans team that clearly does not have a quarterback. You look at what Will Levis was doing out there on Sunday. What the hell was with that one interception he threw? He's falling to the ground. He's trying to throw the ball out of bounds and instead throws it right to Stevenson, and he takes it back to the house for what would end up being the game-winning touchdown in that spot. Even his head coach after the game said, we would have been better off punting. And how damning is that? You have a young quarterback and your coach is saying after the game, you would have been better off punting the football in that spot. But we had a very crazy week 1. And that's even before the games even started, whether it be finding out Jamar Chase is going to play despite not having a contract and having a stomach bug. But it seemed like the entire Bengals team was dealing with a stomach bug as they completely slept on the New England Patriots and tried to act like they could just roll the football out there and come out with a W on their opening week. That Patriots team, I don't think they have a lot of talent, but they showed some spunk, they showed some fight, and really fought hard for their young coach. I think that was what it was about more so than anything. Wanting to get the win for Gerard Mayo in his first week. Wanting to really set a good example or set a good mindset in his first game as a head coach. But you look at the things that happened before the games even started. Dak Prescott becomes the highest paid player in the NFL. We find out about an hour before kickoff that Justin Fields was going to be starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers at quarterback instead of Russell Wilson due to a calf issue. And Fields was fine. He was okay. He was nothing to really brag about. Only threw for $150. I thought the game was more about the defense and the special teams for the Steelers, as Chris Boswell was making some insane kicks throughout this game, and the defense made Kirk Cousins' life a living hell. That's another person that won on Sunday. Michael Penix is looking at that game and saying, I could do worse than this right now. Kirk Cousins is clearly limited coming off of his Achilles surgery. Remember, he tore his Achilles later than Rodgers did. Rodgers tore his Achilles a year ago tomorrow. Kirk Cousins, it was in the middle of October. So he's still probably in that period of his shaking off the rust, even more so than Aaron Rodgers, especially when you consider he didn't play at all in this preseason. And with the fact that he was never a mobile quarterback to begin with, it doesn't do him any help going up against a Steelers pass rush like that in week 1. And on top of that, you've got the former head coach of the Falcons, Arthur Smith, now part of the Steelers coaching staff, so he knows all of their tendencies. He knows all about these players on the other side and can provide a little bit of an edge for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's unfortunate that what happened on the field was not the number one story coming out of week 1. Not Dak Prescott's new contract, not anything involving any upsets, the rookie quarterbacks, Justin Fields, Kendrick Lamar being announced as the Super Bowl halftime performer. No. The number one story is what happened to Tyreek Hill. And I'm glad I'm doing this podcast today rather than yesterday, as Tyreek Hill, on the way to his game on Sunday, was stopped for a traffic violation by Miami police officers and dragged out of his car. You watch the initial videos on social media on Sunday and you're seeing him face first on the ground. You see him dragged to the ground by police officers and you're wondering, what the hell is going on here? What did he do? After watching the body camera from the police officers last night, on one hand, Tyreek Hill started this whole thing off on the wrong foot. When you're pulled over by police officers, the best thing to do is just roll your windows down, put your hands on your steering wheel, whether you're man, woman, a teenager, an older person, no matter what race or nationality you are. Just open the windows, put your hands on the steering wheel, and don't say anything to the police officer. But Tyreek Hill instead decided to roll up the windows, and that's when things started to get feisty. That's when things started to get testy, as you had one of the police officers knocking on the window. He's screaming, "Hey, don't bang on my window." He finally opens the window, hands him his license, identification, and then rolls up the window again before they open the door of the car and drag him out and put him in handcuffs. Then you're seeing teammates of his like Calais Campbell, Jonnu Smith coming up on the situation as they were on their way to the game, trying to somewhat calm things down, and the police officers are getting up in their face. Calais Campbell's getting handcuffs put on him. You're seeing one of the police officers as Tyreek Hill's face first on the ground with his knee on his back, putting handcuffs on him, referring to him as boy, really talking derogatory, talking down to him. I believe by my count there was at least 4, probably 5 police officers on scene for this. Well, as I said, Tyreek Hill did not handle the situation in the beginning the right way. Should have kept his windows down and been a little bit more cooperative with the police officers. There was no reason whatsoever for them to be dragging him out of his car in that fashion and throwing him on the ground, putting your knee on the man's back while handcuffing him. And then when you're standing him up and he's just standing there, not putting up a fight, not kicking and screaming, not doing anything like that, and you forcefully drag him to the ground once again. Folks, I like to believe that in this country, we have a lot of great police officers, that the men and women in blue, men and women in the black uniforms with their badges on, the large majority of them, the overwhelming large majority of them, do their job the right way. But then there's still that 5 to 6% of police officers that don't deserve their badge. And right there, you saw an example of some officers that don't deserve their badge. Whether it be the two that were forcefully dragging him to the ground and talking to him like he was a piece of trash, talking down to him like he's one big giant B word, or the 2 to 3 others that, while maybe they were calm in their conversations with Calais Campbell and Jonnu Smith, they didn't do anything to really simmer the situation down, realizing that their fellow officers were handling their job in the absolute wrong way. There was a better way to handle things in that entire situation rather than treating Tyreek Hill in that fashion. And I think Tyreek Hill said it best after the game. What if he wasn't Tyreek Hill? What if it was another black man? It probably happens hundreds of times across this country in any given month. Situations like that for people who are not famous, people who are not a talented football player or actor or something along those lines. And it goes unfought for. It goes without any justice for the person that was wrongfully treated by an officer that is abusing their power, abusing their authority. And that's what this was. That was an abuse of power. That was an abuse of authority. They saw a black man driving a car that was worth over $400,000. And they thought, you know what? I'm going to make a statement out of this guy. I'm going to put him back in line, put him in his place. I am completely with Tyreek Hill and the Miami Dolphins organization here. I saw the interviews with Mike McDaniels and how he was pretty much in tears talking about this. And I hope that there's some justice here. I hope that those officers, all of them that were involved in that spot, are not just taken off of street duty, but lose their badges altogether. Because the way they handled that was absolutely ridiculous. Administrative leave and being put on desk duty is not good enough as far as sanctions that should be thrown against them.
I'll be back.
For a team that is in first place, a team that has the best record in the American League in Major League Baseball, the New York Yankees sure are an extremely aggravating bunch to watch play baseball sometimes, especially after that 50-22 start, where since that time, they are 32-39. They are an under 500 team, have lost to teams that they shouldn't have. Like, you look at the month of August, they were barely over 500, and they were playing teams like the White Sox, the Nationals, teams that were not in competition for playoff spots, losing to teams like the Nationals and Cardinals, including that series at Yankee Stadium against the Cardinals. And they leave you to be aggravated about a lot of things, especially when you have this unjustified arrogance by both the general manager, Brian Cashman, and the manager, Aaron Boone. How they just remain stubborn about so many different things. Like, for example, ignoring maybe the biggest problem on this team all year long, and that is they do not have a closer. They ignored it at the trade deadline because Cashman didn't want to trade the right pieces to go get a Tanner Scott from the Marlins. He ended up going to the Padres to become their setup guy. There weren't trades that he was willing to make such as I wanted him to go get former Yankee Chad Green from the Toronto Blue Jays. He didn't do that. He settled for a guy like Mark Leiter, who has pitched like trash since becoming a New York Yankee. Especially when you have a bullpen where you had guys on the IL like Ian Hamilton. You had reclamation projects like Luke Weaver and Mike Tonkin, who he's since been DFA'd, pretty much getting overused and starting to run on fumes. You were getting to the point where other reclamation projects like Jake Cousins and Tim Hill were your most trustworthy relievers on this team, because your closer, Clay Holmes, was pitching like outright trash. I don't give a damn that under 3 ERA for most of the season. 11 blown saves is 11 blown saves. Stop with all of the soft contact nonsense. Stop with acting like we're stupid and we don't know what we're watching. He was blowing saves left and right, whether it be giving up home runs on the final strike of the game to light hitters from the Boston Red Sox, giving up sac flies with runners on the corner. Hell, coming into clean innings and blowing multi-run saves. Clay Holmes, while when he first came to the Yankees, was a very good pitcher. Since they've put him in the closer role, he's been pretty much cardiac Clay. This year has had Yankee fans screaming at the top of their lungs, had them pulling their hairs out of their head, and wondering why they continued to put up with this crap, why they continued to put up with this nonsense. And finally, last Tuesday night against the Texas Rangers, when he gave up the walk-off grand slam to Langford, that was the final straw. That was the time where the Yankees finally said, you know what? Enough is enough. We got to make a change here, and we got to use some kind of different formula for closing games, because Clay Holmes is not the guy. They've used Luke Weaver in some spots since then. Last night, Ian Hamilton closed out a game against the Royals, and if you want to win this division, you want to go deep into this postseason, Clay Holmes cannot be your closer. And they've spent too much time wanting to be everybody's best friend and make sure everyone has their feelings in their right place, rather than doing what's right for this team as far as winning games. Doing what's right about putting yourself in the best position in what could be the one and only year that you have Aaron Judge and Juan Soto together to try to win a championship. That's why last week I was so passionate about wanting to bring up Jason Dominguez, because Alex Verdugo, for the most part this season, has been trash. Since that home run against the Red Sox on June 1st, you have not gotten a lot of power out of this guy. He's, after last night, had 2 home runs in the second half of this season. I know he's hit a little bit better as of late, hitting around 320 in his last 13 games. But he's got a batting average of under 240 for the season, having only 11 home runs from a corner outfielder. You know, those are Brett Gardner-like numbers. That's not what you were expecting from this guy. You were expecting this guy to be a doubles machine and be a guy that could hit you 20 to 25 home runs and be a legitimate left-handed bat in that lineup. And when you have a young phenom in your minor leagues that you've already seen have success on the big league level in Jason Dominguez, a guy that is capable of playing multiple positions in your outfield, and you're stubborn by continuing to be loyal to a guy that is not going to be here beyond this year. Alex Verdugo's a pending free agent. He's going to be gone. He's going to be out of here. There's not going to be room to re-sign Verdugo with the contract that they hopefully give Juan Soto. So it really never made any sense. You know what? The one thing I give Alex Verdugo credit for. Last night when he's being interviewed after the game, he said, all I want to do is win. If that means I lose playing time, that means I lose some at-bats, so be it. All I want to do is win, if that's what Jason Dominguez being on this roster means. For as much as I've been annoyed with Alex Verdugo's attitude this year, I give him credit for being wise about that, having a positive vibe attitude with that. What I don't like is when I get comments like what Nestor Cortez said over the weekend, because the Yankees had some decisions to make with their rotation, Clark Schmidt and Luis Gil coming off of the IL. And both of them pitched so well that you can't even consider them for the closer role now. Even though Clark Schmidt has history pitching out of the bullpen, he was great on Saturday. And that's coming off of Luis Gil dominating the Cubs lineup on Friday afternoon. Well, with both of them coming back, coming off the IL, you were going to need someone to piggyback one of them, being that they are not completely stretched out, especially in the case of Schmidt, since he was only at about a 75 pitch count in his last rehab start. So they took Cortez out of the rotation for one time around and had him pitch as the piggyback to Clark Schmidt. Cortez pitched great, but after the game, he whined and complained about it like a little crybaby. I can understand being upset. I like the fact that he was upset and not happy about his role change, but what he said should not have been said publicly, especially calling yourself a workhorse. Cortez, come back to us. Your ERA is barely under 4. You've not been a guy that has gone particularly deep into starts this year. You've gone through 7 innings, maybe 5 times so far this year. Calling yourself the workhorse of the staff just because you happen to start opening day just because of Garrett Cole not being available. You were the only viable option to come out of the bullpen and pitch after one of these guys because you're the only one that's done it. Carlos Rodon is a starting pitcher. He's pitched out of the bullpen only a couple of times early in his career with the Chicago White Sox. And Marcus Stroman has not warmed up as a reliever in close to 10 years. You've done it over the last couple of years. Yes, it's understandable about not liking a role change, but it wasn't a permanent role change. It wasn't a permanent demotion. It was just based off the off days, the situation, and for him to get his nose all out of sorts, saying, I had to switch up my routine here, when instead he should have just came out and said, I'll do what it takes to win. He tried to clean those comments up at the very end. If he would have said what he said at the end of this quote with I'm never going to back down from a challenge. I'm never going to leave my teammates out to dry. You're always going to get my best effort. And if this is my role from here on out, I'll accept it. If that's all he had said in the postgame, fine, cool. I'm 100% with him. But for him to be coming out complaining and claiming that, he's owed something and trying to call himself a workhorse, I thought was completely unnecessary and something that Nestor Cortez, maybe you want to check yourself. Look yourself in the mirror and realize that you're not Andy Pettit. You're not CC Sabathia. You're not David Wells. You're not someone that has accomplished big things with this franchise. You're not a champion. What a champion does is whatever the team needs him to do. And if that means you pitching in relief of Schmidt as he continues to stretch out as a full-time starter, fine. If Boone had any guts, he would just stick Cortez right there in the bullpen and say, you know what, you're going to complain about it? That's going to be your role for the rest of the year. I'm not giving you another start because, quite frankly, with the way Cortez pitched on the road in the first half of this season, he has no right to complain about anything.
I'll be back.
Well, it took them long enough, but the Dallas Cowboys decided to reward Dak Prescott over the weekend and lock him up to an NFL record 4-year extension for $240 million. 131 of that is guaranteed. This shouldn't have taken so long. This could have been done earlier in the offseason. If Jerry Jones was not such an egotistical old fart, he would have gotten this deal done at the beginning of the offseason, whether it be both Dak and CeeDee Lamb, so that they could maneuver the salary cap and maybe go out there and get a real running back, not try to settle for the corpse that is Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe they could have brought back Tony Pollard rather than let him walk out the door. You could be in a better situation as far as working out the deal for Micah Parsons, but instead you decided to haggle with these guys. You decided to make them sit out there. And in the case of Lamb, you waited until after the Justin Jefferson deal was done, after so many of these big-time wide receivers contracts were put in place. With the case of Prescott, you waited until after you saw Joe Burrow, Jordan Love, and Trevor Lawrence get contract extensions of $55 million per year. And as they say, yesterday's price is not today's price. So you were not going to get some kind of bargain for these guys after you made them wait as long as you did. And listen, Dak Prescott has his warts. Dak Prescott is far from being one of the truly elite of the elite quarterbacks in this league. He's a very good quarterback. He's someone that, if my team didn't have Aaron Rodgers, I'd be comfortable with him being the New York Jets quarterback. I think he gets unfairly chastised because he is the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, and the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl since I was in the first grade. He gets unfairly chastised because if he had his 2-5 playoff record with anybody else, you'd be like, all right, that's not great, but you've at least gotten your team to the dance plenty of times. But with the Cowboys, there's the expectation that anything less than an appearance in the NFC Championship game is an utter and complete failure of a season. In 8 years, this guy has only won 2 playoff games. And he has too many of these games where the Cowboys are out of the game by midway through the third quarter, but his numbers look better because he put up what we call empty calorie numbers, throwing the ball a lot in the later stages of the third and fourth quarter, like he did against the Packers in the wild card round last year. That game was not a 48-32 game, folks. He didn't throw for a real 403 yards. A lot of that came after they were already getting their doors blown off and down 27-0 and then down 48-16. So there is something left for him to accomplish. But it's ironic that he gets his contract on a day in which his contract is breaking the record of his opposition. On a day that his contract is breaking the record of a guy that individually might have the most pressure on him of anyone in the NFL coming into this season. You could argue that nobody had a worse Sunday than Deshaun Watson, at least as far as a player is concerned. And listen, I can understand that Deshaun Watson is going through some personal stuff right now. The fact that he's lost his father, lost a brother, lost teammates, lost friends, that kind of stuff can wear on somebody. But I can't have sympathy for him when it comes to these civil suits because he's the one that put himself in that position to have all of these women with these sexual assault allegations against him. And the fact that last year, after he got hurt, you had 4 different quarterbacks come in there and play better under Kevin Stefanski's offense than Deshaun Watson has is an outright embarrassment, especially when you were traded for by the Cleveland Browns for so many draft picks, including 3 first-round picks. They gave you the first fully guaranteed contract of over 9 figures in the history of this league. He's still got $138 million coming to him. And he has not played a full season's worth of games yet for the Cleveland Browns. He looked like utter trash on Sunday afternoon. On a day in which I understand Njoku was dealing with injuries. And he was without both of his starting tackles. And you're still without Nick Chubb. But you got to give your team at least a fighting chance at competing. And he was far from that. He was getting destroyed. He was getting owned by the front 7 of that Cowboys defense. And it's inexcusable when you're getting paid that amount of money. Besides Brown fans, the only fan bases that probably had a worse opening Sunday to this season were Carolina Panther fans who watched their team get shellacked in New Orleans. And then New York Giant fans who, tell me where you heard this before, folks. The Giants get blown out on opening day in MetLife Stadium. First off, what the hell were those jerseys? Please, set those things on fire, bury them in the ground, and never let them be seen again. What do you guys think you were? The Montreal Canadiens? You would have been better off just putting that patch of that logo you had at midfield on your jersey, and no one would have been insulted. I guarantee the likes of Tom Coughlin, Eli Manning, Lawrence Taylor, all of the Giants greats that were there for their 100-year anniversary celebration on Sunday had to be throwing up and laughing at the crap that they were wearing. And that wasn't even the worst part about the Giants on Sunday. The Giants actually had to take the field and try to play a football game, and you saw more of the same that you've seen from this team over the last 18 games of football played for them. I know a lot of people out there are going to be calling for the jobs of Joe Scheon and Brian Daboll to be on the hot seat. But I can't yet do that because I know the worst thing that probably has happened to the Giants the last couple of years is them having that very surprising 9-7-1 season 2 years ago and winning a playoff game against the Vikings on the road before getting their doors blown off against the Eagles in the divisional round. And yes, you can yell at Joe Scheon for the fact that he gave this ridiculous contract extension to Daniel Jones. And since signing that deal, Daniel Jones has thrown more pick sixes than he has thrown touchdowns to his own teammates. I'm not even joking, folks. He's thrown 3 pick sixes in a 6-game span than he's thrown touchdowns to his own teammates. You could say he did a bad job with signing Jones to that contract, letting Barkley walk out the door and not even trading him at the deadline for anything last year. I think a lot of that is because John Mara wouldn't let Joe Scheon trade Saquon Barkley. John Mara, for some reason, has this attachment to Saquon Barkley, even though they never won anything with Saquon Barkley, despite how great he is. But as a front office executive, Joe Scheon had to have had an awful weekend. Watching Barkley dominate against the Packers, watching Xavier McKinney walk out the door and get a pick in that game, and then watching the continued crap from Daniel Jones. Yes, he's done a bad job with those moves, but I would not put those two men on the hot seat, whether it be Scheon or Daboll, because Daniel Jones is not their guy. Those guys, for what we've seen from them 2 years ago with that surprisingly winning season, and then last year, even after the 2-8 start, the fact that Daboll was able to get anything out of this team with Tyrod Taylor and then Tommy DeVito playing. Taylor, who's your classic backup, and DeVito, who is just something that was a flash in the pan and really is not an NFL quarterback. The fact that he was able to settle down their season and even get them to 6 wins was remarkable. But they deserve the right to pick their own quarterback. They deserve the right to choose their own guy after this year. Move on from the Daniel Jones contract. Is it going to likely lead to an ugly season? Yeah. Is it going to likely lead to a time where in November you may not have a lot of fans in the stands? Probably so. And even those that are there are going to still be booing, and the likes of Dexter Lawrence are going to have to get the hell over it and realize that the fans pay their salaries and earn the right to boo players if they're not living up to the deal. But I am not going to sit here, despite how bad Sunday was, and watching that defense get trucked over by Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings. Even as bad as that loss was, I put a large chunk of that on Daniel Jones with these awful interceptions he threw, especially the one to Andrew Van Ginkel where it's a screen pass and he gets picked off by a defensive end. I am not putting this yet at the feet of Daboll and Scheon. They deserve the right to pick their own quarterback, and their quarterback is not Tommy DeVito, it's not Drew Lock, and it is certainly not Daniel Jones. And unfortunately, it's probably going to lead to another very ugly season for the Giants before they have the chance to pick their guy. And that, my friends, was Keeping It Sports with M3 for Tuesday, September 10th, 2024. Everyone, please have a great night. Have a fun, safe, happy, healthy week. You get one life, people, so you might as well try to live it up. And I'll talk to you guys again, same time next week. Until then, peace.
We have to go. Good night, everybody.
I have had enough of you!
Thank you for all the fun. Thank you. Hey, shut up, will ya?
I don't want to see you, I don't want to hear you, and I don't want to smell you. Now leave.
I'll be back.